And in today's episode, we have an investigative journalist as our guest, Jimmy Azande. Welcome to the Anchor.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here on Benny Television.
Okay, so 25 years of democracy in Nigeria. The very first question to ask is, how are we advancing development-wise?
Okay.
So I throw it to you. How better are we?
That's a very good question. Also very tricky. One that if you're not careful, you can go above the roof or maybe go under it. So that in order not to dodge the question completely. Yeah. The pertinent question, like you said, and that is of course a question to people who are watching Nigeria's democracy since 1999. Remember also that before then there were attempts in the past to enthrone democracy in Nigeria. First when the colonial masters left in 1960, that was truncated in about 1966, 1967. And of course, the efforts that brought in President Shehu Shagari in 1979, that was also truncated by the military. And then there was also an attempt, in 1992, 93. That's when we have the Mashood Abiola saga, the June 12th annulment, that today has become a day for celebration in Nigeria. And then in 1999, we eventually got it. And so, well, if you look back, yes, we've achieved to some extent. And to me, the first thing I would mention is that, at least for the first time, we've had cause to celebrate one democratic handover. I mean, from one to the other. I mean, for 4 consecutive times now. It was not like that in the past. And those of us who have witnessed some before, what you call the military, dictatorship, would better appreciate the fact that in any case, you can say civilian rule is quite better. That's number one. And then number two, you also agree with me that, in terms of dividends of democracy, because of course, in a democratic setting, there's other social contract with the people, the masses. It's only about the masses because it says government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And so in terms of that, I scored, Nigeria very low, below average.
Okay.
Why do I say that? From 1999, if you notice, in every society, instead of us to, liberate societies, we end up liberating individuals. I'll give you an example of Benue State, for instance. Some of us, though not born here, have been here as early as 1997. I know people, I know households. I know who were, millionaires in Benue. I know who became millionaires courtesy of the political, calculations in this state. And so we've ended up having some millionaires, if you like, even billionaires, courtesy of the kind of politics we have in Nigeria. And so the people have not benefited. If anything, I will tell you that a lot of things that we enjoyed during the military are no longer here. For instance, the local government administration. I am proud to say everywhere I go that I'm a product of an LGA primary school. That's a local government owned by a school owned by the local government. It was that good. And after my primary school education, I went to a government secondary school. It was that good. But this day, what is happening in our society is that people that send their children to public primary schools or even public secondary schools are people probably who don't have enough financial resources. That's what happened. All our institutions, most of our institutions are deaf. I know in the past, in every local government, there used to be the presence of what you call some kind of a medical presence, general hospital sort of, in all the local governments. Today, what we've noticed is that there's much more concentration on the urban settings. Now, every administrator, talks about the urban settings. There's so much less. During campaigns, a lot of people would tell you, we're going to go down to the grassroots. And then we're having more of what you call rural to urban migration, because those, in the rural areas cannot have the benefit of what you call these social amenities. I'm talking about good roads, I'm talking about markets, I'm talking about hospitals, schools, and of course, electricity. So, yes, we've succeeded because I can say we are in a democratic nation 25 years after. That's kudos to Nigeria. But then in terms of socio-economic democracy, that should provide dividends of democracy to ordinary Nigerians, to the masses, that everybody should be smiling. I mean, it's not yet a whole.
Okay, I mark that. We will come back to this very point. But just before we do that, the federal government decided to go for June 12th as a day to celebrate democracy in Nigeria. And a lot of people are still asking, why June 12 instead of May 29?
Okay, yeah. There were a lot of Nigeria did not get her democratic, journey on the platter of gold. At least the one from 1999, when I was mature enough to know everything that was happening. A lot of people went to prison. A lot of people paid a supreme price with their own lives. In order to, fighting a military. I remember it was so funny, but it was true that a group of civilians told the then Abacha administration that your enthronement, as head of state is illegal. It was rare in those days. Who dare you question the military authority? But some people dared it. I mean, today you're aware that Abiola died as a result of the June 12th struggle. He was not alone, but probably because he was the arrowhead, the figurehead, the man who actually won the presidency as was proclaimed by, the umpire then, but denied the opportunity by the then president Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. So, in the wisdom of former President Muhammadu Buhari, it is actually meant to commemorate the struggles of those who fought for the democracy that we're enjoying today.
Okay.
Some didn't, because you remember a lot of people were incarcerated. Some were actually sent or run on exile. I remember Wole Soyinka, for one, was even sentenced. A death sentence was passed on him, even in absentia. In order, because he was actually, projecting the idea of we must have a democratic setting in Nigeria. A lot of people, like the current president, went on exile. He couldn't stay in this country again in order to spare his life. So many people went to prison like that. So it's quite, good for us Nigerians to begin to appreciate the efforts of this one. These heroes, some of them who didn't even live to enjoy the fruit of their labor. So that's the essence why we moved from 29th of May in every 4 years to June 12th, so that, we are celebrating it as Democracy Day, not just an anniversary for a particular administration.
Are we likely to have this kind of people in the near future to celebrate? Do we have people like that in the present days?
Yeah, Nigeria is with a population of over 200 million people. If you follow statistics from the National Bureau of Statistics and, of course, National Population Commission and, of course, INEC. But then the issue is that it is very difficult to find these ones. Yeah, because in reality, a lot of us are going there not for the society. A lot of us are going there not for what we can give to our people. But basically, I ask people, why is it that in this country when somebody gets elected, or maybe is appointed into a position, and the first thing he or she does is to throw parties? It's like, some kind of liberation from poverty, sort of. And I put up a write-up where I said, and I can stand by it to say that, what we've noticed over the years is that a lot of our leaders or political elites think about first family and then friends. The rest, no one cares so much. And that is why during election, a lot of people will tell you, no, we make sure these rules are fixed. We make sure there's water, right? But in the end, the people that are privileged, to get close to the administration get liberated economically, because for livelihood, for you to survive, you need that economic aspect of life. And then the rest becomes story. So there may be one or two there, yes, but it is quite very difficult for me to sit here and begin to say, yeah, this person tries so much, that person, maybe it's an assignment that want to, do some kind of, some deep investigation. But I can tell you that for sure that, a lot of our leaders have actually failed this country. I think they are aware also.
Okay, that has prompted me to ask our level of commitment to the Nigerian cause as a people.
Yeah.
People break social contract with the people and they go scot-free. Why does it always appear not to be working in our case?
Yes, quite a very fundamental question in this setting. But I tell you, the major problem we have in this country is weak institutions. We are lucky enough not to have a monarchical system where, sometimes you say that, okay, this family will rule for life. No, it's a system where, if you notice, from 1999 to date, we've had different crop of leaders with different backgrounds. Some coming from zero levels. I'm talking about economically. Some probably, coming from some buoyant economic background. And yet you ask yourself, why is it that when somebody gets to the other side, he quickly forgets exactly where he's coming from? A lot of us like that. We know these people. And now sometimes we sit and then try to dodge the question as if these people fall from the sky. No, we know these people, we know their backgrounds. We know what they were before 1999. Some, for instance, in the case of those who are just going into power now, we know where some people were before the 2023 elections. But you can see that economically a lot of have changed within this short time. And so that's the kind of scenario, because if you look at what happened in was it 2001? I can't remember exactly, or 2000, when President Olusegun Obasanjo established the EFCC. Some of us thought, it was actually going to be, the way forward for people to begin for us to have what you call transparency and accountability in governance. But is that the situation? I mean, it's only in this country that you hear of one person amassing, over 100 billions, and then you see the person walking freely on the streets. And then sometimes they tell you that, it's very difficult for the court to prove it. I mean, for it to be proved in court, and then, of course, convict the person. And then, but you and I will know where the person came from. You and I know that probably before now he was just, to some extent, some teacher in some primary school. But by virtue of opportunity, has become so wealthy that, you don't even have to question the word again. So we have a problem with, our institutions. Probably they are not working enough. Of course, not just the EFCC, just a case study for me. You also have the ICPC, and other bodies like that. What are they doing? And of course, the judicial system. Why is it that sometimes in the course of course, the law says, everyone is presumed innocent until proven otherwise by the competent court of law. But then sometimes we know of certain cases before they even get to the court. But what happened at the end of the day? So I can say for me that even the judicial system in this country is questionable. I think with time, maybe, because the political elites have a way of controlling everything, the political life, if you like, even the religious life in recent times, if you notice what is happening. So it's actually very difficult. That commitment, now, of course, tied to that, I think I'll raise the issue of patriotism. How many people even love this country? I had cause to, go back to history again here, that, our foundation as a nation was faulty in the first place. A lot of people would tell you that. And I tend to agree with that school of thought. You're talking about a country that was more or less, like some people will argue, a creation of man and not a creation of God. A situation where the British decided to put up the northern and the southern protectorate together and then call Nigeria. That's what some people argue. And so if you come to Nigeria, we have not actually explored our unity in diversity. This idea that, okay, it is a strength that we have over 300 ethnic groups in Nigeria. Some people will argue that over 500. I don't know of that for sure, but of course it's also a case for investigation. And then people think first from the perspective of their ethnic affiliation. For instance, I think first as a thief person. Then to some extent, if at all I go to church, I think as a Christian before I think as a Nigerian. That's what is happening here. And if you say thief, for instance, I'm just giving an example of my own ethnicity. Then you come to thief and you discover it's much more than just being a thief person. That I am thief, but not just thief. I come from a particular divide of the thief nation. So maybe I'm thinking about, for instance, I come from the what you call the Chongo axis. And then I'm thinking about Chongo people. And then to some extent, I'm thinking about the Minda axis. And then I'm thinking of that place where I come from. And then even within the same family, I am thinking, no, I am actually the son of Azande. I'm not just of the Chi family. These are some of the issues we have in this country. And so, with that kind of mindset, people, there are so many issues hanging. If you like what you call primordial sentiments hanging on Nigerians. So much that nobody's thinking nationalistic. Nobody's thinking about the good of the nation. And of course, it's the reason why we have a lot of issues we have in this country. Because once there is that kind of situation, one, you don't have trust. And then you also don't have confidence in that institution, or in this case, in Nigeria as a country. Because probably you don't even know what is in for you. And that's why people strive. Sometimes I don't blame politicians when they get haywire, with the economy. Because if you know how people sometimes try to get there, you even imagine that. Is this some kind of business? Because they say in business, the more you invest, the more you gain some kind of, by way of profit. But That's the kind of politics we have here. And so there are so many questions that people ask. Where is he coming from? Have these people not ruled before? No, what is he really a true Nigerian? We understand that he's actually from, the Cameroon and all of that. This has come to play.
There are actually so many questions, asking for answers. And the reason for talking about them is to see if we can find a way forward. Jimmy Azande is an investigative journalist and is our guest on the Anchor today. We'll talk about the way out, but just before we do that, let's take a look at the last celebration of Democracy Day in Nigeria. As you were there at IBB Square, where it was celebrated in Benue State, and you are a journalist. You've taken a look at what has happened across the country. What can you say?
Well, two things I noticed in this particular celebration. I remember when democracy returned here. These days were very big days, honestly. Even before President Buhari, former President Buhari, acknowledged June 12th as the celebration day. I remember every May 29, like in Benue State, I remember under Kume administration, a lot of local government chairmen will mobilize, their supporters across board and bring them down to the state headquarters for celebration. It was massive.
Yeah.
But that tradition died off after some time, especially in Buhari's era. He was not into this. He was more into this idea of doing everything on low key. So to some extent, it was no longer there. And then it resurfaced again in this administration. It was unique when I saw, not only in Benue State, across the nation, when governors walked to some kind of public square nearest to, their government houses. It was not just in Benue. It happened in other states too like that. So, but the case today in Benue State, I noticed that. And remember also that I think whoever needed to be by the way of the political elites, was in IBB Square on that day. At least I noticed that. Is it a traditional institution? Is it a religious institution? Is it the political or the security forces? All were at the IBB Square. But then we also noticed that, His Excellency in his own way cut out the protocol. If you look at the program that was distributed before his arrival, a lot of people were supposed to talk. Probably through their voices we hear one or two. But of course, that didn't stop some of us, from going behind the scene to talk to people, to listen to their hearts, to think about what they are thinking. By way of assessment of the current democratic dispensation. But of course, the common enemy that we have now is no longer the corruption that we used to talk about. Is basically hunger. There's hunger in the land. And so you expect every kind of celebration we have now to be on a low key. And what I saw, to some extent, to me was on a low key.
Okay, so what, as an investigative journalist, what is your own interpretation of the action His Excellency took by crashing the program?
No,
people were actually expecting to hear goodwill messages, representations of the zones in the state, women, and he just decided to crash everything down to
his own speech,
and that was the end of it.
Exactly. So there's something I like. There's something about leadership. It's not just going with a particular template. Sometimes you adjust based on the situation.
Okay.
As at the time His Excellency arrived there at the square venue for the celebration, a lot of us were already tired, honestly. For whatever reason, we thought by 10 he'll be there, but we understood later that probably the march started by 10. And so before he got to that place, a lot of people were tired. And of course, the sun was scorching on that day. And so it was in the best interest of everyone. I mean, there are 1,001 occasions. I think that's what is reflected in what I saw. Was it just yesterday? Communicated to the public, where the governor is going to do what you call a thank you tour of the federal constituencies in Benue State, 11 of them. There is actually an itinerary that is communicated to the public already. I think at that point we'll be able to hear whatever they would have said, and that maybe more voices other than the ones listed in the program. So I think it was for the best interest of all of us who waited, and some of us got tired waiting for His Excellency to arrive there. So it was best to adjust the program at that point.
All right. Prior to the celebration of Democracy Day, prior to June 12, we had cause to interact on the minimum wage,
Yes, exactly.
and people expected to hear, rounded statements from the authorities on May Day, and that didn't happen.
I too, in fact, I told someone in confidence that, in the course of President Tinubu's, as at the federal level now,
Yeah.
speech, was going to mention minimum wage by way of pronouncement, that this is it. A lot of people waited to hear that too. Even at the state level too, I expected to hear that pronouncement. We're dealing with figures here. Everybody wanted to hear a particular figure. But that didn't happen. But I get to understand something later. One, for the president to go ahead and consider the issue of minimum wage, I don't speak for the president. I'm speaking as an investigative journalist now. To go ahead and pronounce a minimum wage will be his greatest undoing at the moment. Why do I say that? Like I said in that program, we're not dealing with just the federal workers. We're dealing with those in the private sector. We're dealing with states, so that some have merely implemented the 18% minimum wage we're talking about before the one of 30,000 naira. That today, a number of states have not implemented the 30,000 naira minimum wage, and then we're talking about 60,000 plus. As in the case of the federal government, Labour has not actually tell us this is exactly what we finally agreed on, because they said the ball was in the court of Mr. President to decide.
At
So
least they
I mean,
came to
they're waiting for an
250.
announcement. They're waiting for, even at that, they're waiting for an announcement, because remember that 1 week grace was not just about negotiations, about giving the government some time, because remember immediately after that warning, or do I say strike, suspended in the second day, the president actually directed the minister for, finance to put up a template. I'm sure that template is communicated. And then shortly after that, the state governors met. And this is where a lot of them said, we cannot pay. I said a lot, said we cannot pay that figure. Is actually a document out for public consumption now. Some proffered what, they could or they can't pay at the moment, judging by their peculiarities. And so I think it's something that has to be taken holistically. Because I said it, and I stand by this, that it's not just the, federal workers that go to the market. Today, you know how much, what the sellers call custard rubber of rice is going for about 7,000. That's between 6,000 and 7,000 naira. That's the reality right now. And then you're talking about probably a few persons can get past buying that in their homes. But what about the majority of Nigerians? Some that don't earn nothing. There are people that if you check their bank history, for 1 year, probably you hardly find a transaction of 10,000 naira. It's a reality. And so we're talking about in a country where people are multidimensionally poor, the poor of the poorest. I think Labour didn't put this into their consideration. And that is why the issue of increasing the wages of workers is a constitutional thing that I would expect the president to hold on to. Like the Constitution said, every 5 years, right? I would also expect that we think about fighting inflation in this country. We think about the cost of living. We think about the prices of goods and commodities. Why is it that the government is no longer interested in controlling prices of things? That today, not even the farmers, the people who are, deciding what happened in the market space are the middlemen, what the tea people will call beranda. They're the ones deciding, because they're the ones who get it from the poor farmers. And then, of course, by the time they come to they decide how much the prices go. And so this is a very major problem that I think Labour should also include in the agitation. I didn't see that there. And now we're talking about the issue of petroleum, for instance. A lot of people will tell you, no, normally it shouldn't be a problem. I'm just coming from Wadata, where I got to talk to some ram sellers. By now, last year, you'll see a beehive of activities.
So
knowing that.
By the way things are going now,
Yes.
do you see a conclusion on the matter in the immediate future?
No, it is quite very difficult, because even the federal government that has the wherewithal to tell us what is happening is undecisive. I mean, there's this talk that keeps coming up. You should continue to endure. Tough times will not last forever. This is what we get from the federal government. And so, but the question some of us are asking, when? How soon? How will that be when most Nigerians living at this point are dead? Or will that happen in which generation? I don't know. So what I was trying to say is that the government can decide and say, okay, there was a promise that by December, last year, we're going to have some kind of production at the Port Harcourt refinery. By now, we should have the one in Warri working, and of course, talking about the one in Kaduna. But then that's not the situation. I didn't see all of this covered in their own write-up. I tell you this, Mr. TV, if we have a system where you have to pay less for hospital, you have to pay less for school, you have to pay less for all of these, like electricity, right? That is also included in the agitation. Then, of course, you won't have need for much money. A situation where the public transport system is working effectively, like it's happening elsewhere in the world. You wouldn't even need your own vehicle, knowing that by the time you jump out of your house, you're going to catch on the next bus to your destination. But all of that is not working, and that's where some of us have problems. So by the time you take your wages, your living wages, for instance, to 250 minimum wage, then you know also that we're going to have a situation where a bag of rice, a 25 kg bag of rice will go for not less than 100,000 naira. And that will bring in more poverty in the land. Because why the workers, or federal workers in this case, will afford that? What about those working at the state level? What about those of us working in the private sector? And those who don't have jobs at all? These are some of the permutations that we must look into. But so far, I can tell you that, well, they say it's in the pipeline. I can't see what is in the pipeline, right? But I think the government, in this 1 year, has not done Nigeria well on the economy.
Okay.
The suffering is too much.
Let's look at the way forward quickly, especially as concerns the states.
Yes.
They say they can't pay, but I understand a particular state in the country is already paying 70,000 naira as minimum wage. I don't know how true that is. That some, the reason might be genuine, but some can even pay more than that. So what will be your candid advice?
Well, there are some states that are richer, close to what the federal government has. It's just that the federal government is always federal government, because the federal government is the totality of even what is coming from your own state. Otherwise, states like Rivers, states like Lagos, states like Kano can do well economically on their own. That is notwithstanding. But of course, what about you come to other smaller ones like Gombe State, like Taraba State, some of these other ones? What's the mainstay? What's the economy? So it becomes a problem there. So my way out would be that, like I said in my preceding statements, we should try and make the cost of living, we should try and reduce the cost of living. You and I know that today in Benue State, in Makurdi, for instance, where you hear of, Ankpa quarters, Kwarafa quarters, Lobi quarters, these were efforts of the government to make sure that, the cost of housing was minimized. And today, a lot of our people, our parents, a lot of our relations have homes because the government provided all of that. In recent times, you notice that whenever there is something like that, the people that buy that see the people in government who have the wherewithal to buy. Sometimes you go to where an allocation is better and one person is having more than 20 units. If you provide all of this, then the people will need just a little money in their pocket to survive. So the social aspect of life is what the social life. By the time we provide social amenities, I mentioned earlier, hospitals. If I go to the hospital, I should spend less, but then I should get treatment for what I go there for. The same thing with my family. That kind of health insurance. The same thing with transportation. Like, you remember, some of us thought people wouldn't travel for the last Christmas. But if you look at what the government of earlier did in Benue State, through Benue Links, a lot of people, I remember like 23rd, 24th, I was there, I saw that some people were even carted to their villages, free of charge. Free of charge. Before that time, it was minimized. We expect by this time, the way the transporters were going, we have, Makurdi to Boko not less than 5,000 naira. But then that alone has actually cut down the prices. Recently, I saw one popular one, not advertising anyone, so I won't call them, saying that they've cut down their prices. By the time you have that kind of situation, the government, sometimes they say government has no business in business. And yet it's the government that can provide that kind of, enabling environment for businesses to strive. So let's fix our social amenities.
Okay. Jimmy Azan, the investigative journalist, thank you so much for being our guest on the Anchor today.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. Thank you, Nigerians.
And so this is where we end for now. Join us again when we make a return. I am Teve Agabi. See you again.
Welcome to the exciting world of Benue Television, where we give you an exclusive ride into the world of news, current affairs, and entertainment.